Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Veramed Stories podcast. I'm your host, Himesh Chauhan. November is already behind us, and as I'm sure all of you are aware, November is Men's Health Awareness Month. Joining me this week is Stuart McGuire. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me, Himesh. Pleasure to be here.
No, thank you for taking the time to come on here. So, a few years ago, yourself and I and a few others, Matt Jones, we all did a Movember. But this year, you did something slightly different. We were to tell the audience what you did this year.
I've been a keen moustache grower for a number of years, and I'll share my history on that a bit later. But this year, I was really saddened by the passing of a friend of mine's son from a brain tumour. So it really, really struck me, and I felt just wanted to sort of change it up and do something a little bit different. So this year, undertook the challenge of 100 press-ups a day.
Oh, wow.
For Cancer Research UK. So Cancer Research is a phenomenal organisation. Not only do they conduct research, but they also have a huge amount of information for people, going through their cancer journey. So I wanted to do something a little bit different this year, and I have to say, 100 press-ups a day is a challenge.
No, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say I'm sorry for your friend's loss, and it's always tragic when anyone that you know passes away, especially a young child. Yeah, 100 press-ups a day, that is a hell of a challenge. How did you find it? Was it a struggle at first and you got better, or how was it?
Actually, yes. I think it's one of these things that basically the counting. So I was doing them in groups of 10. So I'd have like 10 golf balls and I'd do 10 press-ups, then move a golf ball. And that was my way of just like keeping the motivation, keeping the cadence. And actually I started to do them like throughout the day. Then I was managing to do them in half a day. And now I'm able to do them within sort of 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a real progressive thing. I did think of moving to 20 press-ups, but I decided actually get through this challenge, do them in batches that you're comfortable with. And it's been great.
Is it something that you'll continue on anyway, just in terms of keeping fit?
Yeah, I'd very much like to. I have to say, it felt like a real impossible target, and now I feel very comfortable. So I say it is very comfortable doing it every day. Sometimes when you're traveling with business and you're in hotels, it's a little bit more difficult to fit into the schedule. But and I think 100 a day is definitely doable.
No, that's very good because, I've heard a lot of people do variations of it, or they'll do 100 press-ups a day, then 100 sit-ups a day, and then like chains of variations of the press-ups as well. So as you get more advanced, you'll be doing triangle press-ups, wide grip press-ups, one-handed press-ups, or even the famous Bruce Lee one finger, one thumb press-ups.
But actually, there was a person in our group who decided that he was going to do these clap press-ups. And then I think very quickly into the challenge, he suggested that press-ups being press-ups were absolutely fine.
Yeah, no, I've tried clap press-ups before, and they're hard enough. And then I've seen people on the internet, they do double claps, so clap in front, clap behind, and I don't know how they do it without smacking their face. But no, that's really good. And did you sort of notice a change in your body after doing these for so long?
No, not yet. I'm going to say not yet. I haven't. I'm definitely feeling, after doing them, you get that little mini endorphin rush, which I guess you get from all exercise, which is great. But yeah, no, not seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger ripped body quite yet. So still a way to go.
Well, this time next year, who knows? Like you'll be post like in front of Men's Fitness. Who knows? Like we do a Veramed Fitness. Why not? Did anyone else from Veramed join you on this challenge?
Yeah, so I had an amazing response. So Iro, Catherine Hutchinson, Louise Chapman, James Walsham, and James Mann. And actually, James Mann does claim to have a change in body from only halfway through the challenge. He said he's noticed. So yeah, it's actually been really cool because we've got a little mini WhatsApp group, and we post where we do our press-ups. I'm quite regimented. I try to get them done before 9 in the morning, so I try to get ahead of the day, get them out there. But some people are definitely lunchtime press uppers, if that's a new term.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. People do like a lunchtime exercise. I myself get too hungry at lunch and I need my food. Was it either last year or the year before, one of the lockdowns, who remembers? I obviously couldn't go to the gym, so I did something very similar. Just like, it wasn't for any charity or anything like that. So I tried doing it, and it's amazing like how much you struggle on day one, and then by week 2, week 3, you're just firing them out, and it feels good. And like you said, you get the endorphin rush, you feel better about it, and it's a quite simple exercise, but it's how you space them out. I remember one day I did like 20 in the morning, like, and then every couple of hours just did like 10, 20, maybe 30, depending how I was feeling. And like, you just get them in and you feel better for it. So yeah, no, it's really good. Obviously, men's health is something that is very personal to you. Would you be comfortable in sharing your journey with the podcast?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I, back in 2010, was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Feels like a long time ago now, but I was diagnosed. I was treated fairly quickly. I had my orchidectomy, which is the removal of the testicle. Then I had a round of chemotherapy, and then I had 15 days of radiotherapy. The chemotherapy, some of my friends who've had testicular cancer, we incidentally, we call ourselves the one-offs. So we've got like a little mini group that we hang out together, not literally, but we chat as a team. Some of them had more chemo cycles, a different type of testicular cancer. I was fairly fortunate that mine had just spread to the lymph nodes in my stomach. It was very straightforward in the treatment, but the chemo only had one cycle, and then the radiotherapy was pretty brutal. Felt pretty tired going through that. But yeah, you trust the physicians. You try not to look at too much stuff out there on the internet or the chat rooms, and that's why going back to Cancer Research UK and the Movember, and just so much material and source of information out there, really good stuff to read, not the scary, alarming stuff that there is out there, but some really good factual information. So I went through that process, and then I had a number of scans to make sure that the treatment had been successful. And then I was followed up weekly, monthly, every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. And then after 10 years, you're kind of released, as in you're no longer a patient of concern. So thankfully, during lockdown, I had my final CT scan. Thankfully, everything all good, and signed off, which was amazing.
I've definitely noticed in the recent years, there's been a big push on making sure that young men are checking themselves, like in the shower, making sure it's becomes part of your daily routine, really, because like it can affect anyone at any age, really. How did you how did it all come about, really?
Yeah, no, I'm going to be very honest. So I had a very hard left testicle, and I'd been doing quite a lot of cycling down in Cornwall at the time. So I just assumed it was like a bruise or I'd hurt myself. And it's funny, like, sharing with you, because it's such a taboo subject, talking about your men's private parts, and it really, really shouldn't be. And I put off going for a scan for a little while. I finally thought, I've got to address this, and went off and got scanned. And actually, that sort of is very typical, is like that head in the sand, try not to face it. But I'm glad I did, because it can only just spread and get worse. And although a lot of people think very badly of Lance Armstrong, and he did some pretty poor decisions, but his book on the journey that he had through his testicular cancer is absolutely fascinating. And anybody that is confronted with this, he really was a very extreme patient. Sadly, his spread all the way up to his brain. So his story and his testament and his book is absolutely brilliant. I don't agree with Lance Armstrong as a brand, but his book is absolutely phenomenal. And anybody who is sort of faced with this should definitely read it. I would also say that I think there has been a tremendous increase in awareness on men's health, mental health, suicide rates amongst young men. And that, I think, has really brought around a much better place for discussion, whether it be at the golf club, whether it be down at the pub, whether it be at the squash courts. But I think people are starting to talk about it a lot more, which is only for the good.
Definitely, and I completely agree. And I'm sure everybody has noticed as well, like a big push on getting people to talk. And that is definitely the first step of just helping anyone going through anything. I've listened to Ian's episode on mental health. I've done an episode on neurodiversity. And the big thing is talking with people, because you find you're not alone. People are either going through the similar thing to you or have gone through something similar to you. And that is one of the easiest things to do and one of the best things to do as well. And there's definitely a generational shift I've found even in my life of men. You don't talk about anything, boys don't cry sort of thing, to it's okay, it's fine, it's perfectly normal, and it's good. So is there any sort of advice that you would give to anyone going through something similar or gone through something similar or anything?
So one of the things that I've taken from November, actually, after I got sort of signed off, as it were, November reached out to me and said, would I be comfortable being an ambassador, which, is nice. But the real nuts and bolts of that is you're paired with somebody who's been recently diagnosed. So I've been paired with a gentleman who's based over in Wales, and he's actually a little bit older than I am, but he has just completed his chemotherapy and is going through at the moment his radiotherapy. So on the one hand, it kind of brings back all these memories, and that's quite interesting, but also just sharing that it's not as scary as it needs to be. Just, understanding, what he's got in front of him, what he needs to do, taking rest, eating properly, sleeping when he can sleep, drinking when he can drink, water, that is, yes. Keeping hydrated. Just talking through those things in a very, being there, it doesn't need to be as scary as it sounds. I mean, chemotherapy, just as in a word, just sounds so scary to people. Yes. And then when you just sort of unpack it, talk about, how you're going to feel. Radiotherapy sounds, it just sounds, wow, that belongs to somebody else. So just unpacking that, talking about it in a real process. This is what you need to do. It's not forever. Yeah. Go through a cycle, and then afterwards, you should be fine, sort of thing. So just giving a real sort of positive sort of narrative and dialogue on that, and just having a real conversation, talking to people. It is scary, and that's why it does sound so taboo. But just, trying to provide some background and sharing on it.
No, absolutely. And did you find, before you had your operation to have the infected testicle removed, was there any sort of like stigma or anything, or like personal feelings behind that? How did you feel when they told you about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think at the time you just think the worst. So you're like, okay, I've had a good innings. It's time to, move off this mortal planet. And your head goes to the worst possible place.
Right.
And then after reading a load of stuff from Cancer Research UK from the November, you're like, oh, wow, I've got a really good fighting chance. And I think what I learned very quickly was my type of cancer. If I had it in the 70s, my life expectancy, I think, would be like sort of 10%.
Oh, wow.
But now with the carboplatin, chemo and so on, and, the technologies associated, the understanding, survival is, up at 90%.
Oh, amazing.
So that was like a sort of a wow moment. People talk about cancer as if it's just like this great big homogeneous thing, but it's not. There's like, many, many different types of cancer, and working in clinical research, you become very aware of that, but the overall public, aren't so familiar. So I just trying to get an understanding of what your prognosis actually means, and then quickly understanding, okay, I need to do the right things here to get through this, and really massively trusting doctors and your nurses, and just listening to what they say. Obviously challenging a little bit. I had a friend of mine who works in clinical research. He thought my radiotherapy dosage was a little bit low. I talked that through with my oncologist. oncologist then went, absolutely, I think, thinking about it, we need to up it a little bit. So, having that dialogue, it is great. But yeah, to answer your question directly, scary, really, really scary. But then quickly into a place of, I'm going to fight this and it's not going to get me down.
No, that's really good to hear. And was there any sort of, how to put it, like any sort of feeling that you might feel sort of less of a man or anything like this? Like, was there any that kind of stigma or like any feelings or thoughts that you had initially?
Wow, that is a really, really good question. Actually, I think humor is something that, I personally, use to get through some tricky situations. So I started writing a blog and putting, like emails and letters out to friends and family. And, and then the humor comes back. It's like, okay, you've had the testicle removed. What are you going to have put in place? Maybe you're going to get like a little Wi-Fi chip put in there, or what are you going to do? So no, I never really felt that. I just felt more like, I mean, when it comes to testicles, they're probably the least attractive thing of anybody. So you're like, losing one. I felt quite fortunate that that was the extent of it, and
Yeah.
there were a couple of guys in the one-offs who had replacements put in. I didn't feel the need for that. All I could think of, it would be incredibly painful when you're cycling or swimming. So I didn't go down that route. But yeah, no, that's obviously a consideration.
No, absolutely. Forgive me. So I don't know how old your daughters are. Had you already had your kids before, or?
Yeah, so and that's another thing that sort of myth busting, debugging, I guess, is that my first daughter was very, very young when I was diagnosed, so she didn't really have any understanding of it, and it was great to have her around, really motivating and upbeat. And then fortunately, I was able to have my second daughter post the removal and the treatment. So I'd given it a sort of a fair amount of time, a year or so before she joined us. So yes, no, absolutely, everything still works. And actually, it's very interesting that you can have things removed and you can still function pretty well.
Yeah, it's a good thing they come in pairs.
Indeed.
No, excellent. No, that's really good, because I think some, like you said, it's maybe stigma, some misinformation or whatever, and people might just think like, oh, like if I've got it, it's over for me. And like if you get testicular cancer young, doesn't mean you will not be able to have kids in the future. And it's not obviously it's life changing, but it's still, once you've recovered, you can still live a normal life, so to speak. Is there any other sort of thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I just think it's hopefully with everything that's out there, everything's been communicated, and with all, I guess, cancers, it's getting it early. So if you do feel lumps, bumps, go get yourself a scan, and they'll quickly get onto it. I've had several situations where I've had people come up to me and said, I've heard one of your talks, or I've read something that you've put out there. I went and got myself checked, turned out to be benign, but it saved a lot of worry. Some of my friends in the one-off group have had people who have then gone on to be diagnosed, but have been caught much, much earlier, just from hearing the communications and podcasts and stuff that's out there. So, I think, during COVID, probably people were less eager to go and see their doctor, less eager to go and see the hospital. We've just got to break that apart and just say, if you've got something there, get it seen too early, get it looked at. Chances are you'll be absolutely fine. But in the small chance that it's not, you can deal with it, get on with it.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's one of those things where if you do find a lump and it turns out to be nothing, but you don't get checked for ages, it plays on your mind. You're stressed, and it's just like it will affect your life in other ways. And stress isn't healthy for anyone anyway. So yeah, you're right. And I completely agree. Talk it out, go get checked as soon as possible. Is there anything that you like to sort of promote, like any of your blogs or anything that people can read?
No, I think there's some really, as I sort of mentioned before, November got a great website. They've got a fantastic campaign, some really good facts. I promote Cancer Research UK, and I would also, promote, giving where you can, because that is, an investment in the future. So, if you've got a spare couple of pounds, I know things are really, tough at the moment, tight with the cost of living, but investing in some of these charities, because it is, the research that has been able to cure a number of these horrible cancers. There is so much work going on in a whole variety of research. There's some really exciting stuff coming through constantly, but that's expensive. It's really, really expensive. So we need to continue to invest in that.
Sorry, I just thought of another question, actually. You going through all this, was this one of the reasons that you came into the pharmaceutical industry?
No, actually, that's a really good question. So I was already in the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And I had a number of friends who are quite high up in companies researching oncology. So I had a really nice base of people to speak with. But what it did, it really gave me a huge amount of purpose. And working in the pharma industry, I mean, some of it is quite, laborious. You're doing QC checks, you're doing data work. Sometimes it feels really, really heavy, but it's all going for the future benefit of patients. And I think the Janssen strapline is the patient is waiting. And, in our industry, that is so, so true. We are doing things for the greater good, and everything that we piece together, whether it's, enabling a pharma company to get to submission, whether it's getting data of proof of concept out there, whether it's, a doctor presenting at a conference, it's all going towards the greater good. And I feel very fortunate to be working in this industry. So, it has sharpened my mind, considering what we do. It's given me a real renewed sense of purpose.
Excellent. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast and speaking so openly about your experiences and things like this. And like we mentioned, talking is very important. And I hope someone listening will feel inspired to get themselves checked. If they're being a bit worried, go to the doctor, get things done, and just talk about things. And hopefully we can help spread more awareness and get rid of any sort of lying stigmas that there are. I know things have changed a lot in the last few years and hopefully continue to change and improve. Thank you all very much for listening. If you would like to be notified for any future episodes, please subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever podcast platform you're using. If you'd like to know more about Veramed, please visit our website at veramed.co.uk, or you can find us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about Veramed, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at We Are Veramed. Thank you all very much for listening, and until the next time, goodbye.